I am consistently surprised about how many people want to hear me talk about ancient Egypt. While Egyptian magic and religion aren't the only part of my magical practice, there's certainly a large part of it. And it seems to be where my viewers and my own interests intersect. So strap in, everyone. We're going to do the full Monty. Welcome to part 1 of Egyptian magical practice. Hey folks, this is James, aka Thresciornis, and I'm going to start out with admitting that my motivations for doing this series of videos isn't entirely pure. Because what I'm hoping to do here is shift people's perspectives, especially people in the occult community, because there's a lot of misconceptions about ancient Egypt. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and, I'm going to spend some time dispelling those ideas, but hopefully what I'm mostly doing is giving you an alternative, giving you more of what the ancient Egyptians actually did than trying to fit their beliefs into our own experiences and our own beliefs. Myths are great. Myths are what magic is made of. But I have a problem when people can't tell the difference between myth and history. And more to the point, I think that we're missing out on a lot when we don't have the context, that all-important context that I'm talking about. And it's a shame, really. So I'm going to say some controversial things, at least controversial to some people, and we're just going to have to live with it. Kabbalah does not come from ancient Egypt. It was invented much later. Tarot does not come from ancient Egypt. It was invented much later. Most of alchemy does not come from ancient Egypt. And maybe you can see some of the roots of alchemy in later Ptolemaic Egypt, but alchemy as its practice as an art in later medieval Western alchemy doesn't come from ancient Egypt. And, it's fine if you see that these ideas were inspired by ancient Egypt. It's fine to have that mythology in your practice, but understand that there's no historical evidence for it. And I'm not even talking about people who believe aliens built the pyramids. I mean, that's just ridiculousness. I'm once again talking about Blavatsky, Mathers, and Crowley injecting ideas into the occult that were based on what they thought magic was about, not what was actually practiced in ancient Egypt. I always say I'm not a scholar. Well, they weren't scholars either. They were probably a lot closer to it than I am. But I also have the benefit of decades of research and archaeology and history. So I'm going to say, yeah, Crowley, Mathers, Blavatsky, oftentimes they were wrong. And what's even worse is that they're wrong because they're trying to give their magic some kind of false authenticity. They're trying to give it this weight of having come from ancient Egypt when the connections, they just really aren't there. But hey, let's focus on what the ancient Egyptians actually believed and the magic they actually practiced. And let's start off with why ancient Egypt? Why is ancient Egyptian magic so important in the first place? Well, once again, as I've said before, what we have is 3,000 years of continuous culture, and a culture that absolutely believed in magic. A culture that did not see a difference between magic and religion, no difference between magic and medicine, no difference between magic and everything. Magic was the order of the universe. And we're going to touch some more of that later when we talk about how ancient Egyptians defined magic. But don't take my word for it. Listen to their contemporaries. This quote from the Talmud: 10 measures of magic have come into the world. Egypt received 9 of these, the rest of the world 1 measure. So imagine you're a part of a culture, a contemporary culture, that has plenty of their own famous magicians, Solomon being a prime example, and just coming out and admitting that the Egyptians do it better. We have an all-powerful God who looks after us, but when it comes to magic, well, the Egyptians have everyone beat. And if you look at it from that perspective, you're going to have to say to yourself, maybe I can learn something here. I really love that quote, and you'll see it around in a lot of different places. I've used it before myself, but I distinctly remember the first place that I saw it, and that was in Robert Craig Rittner's Mechanics of Ancient Egyptian Magical Practice. And that was published by the University of Chicago Oriental Institute in 1993. Oriental Institute, we've all stopped using the word Oriental a long time ago. I think it's time to change. But hey, lucky for us, they offer that book as a PDF for free to download from their website. And I absolutely recommend it. This series is not going to be a book review, but I find Rittner to kind of be the gold standard on ancient Egyptian magic, and so we're going to frame it in a way that kind of goes along with that book. Now, if you do decide to download and read that book, a word of warning: it is dense, and it uses a lot of ancient language. It is very scholarly and has a lot of references, and it's not the kind of thing, at least for me, the kind of book that I'm just going to pick up and read from cover to cover. That's not how this book works. This is a book that you're going to have to go back to several times and pick it apart and take the time to go and research the related concepts before you really grasp it. And it's a lot of effort, but I think it's worth it. And, well, you'll have these videos as a companion now, so maybe dig in yourself. See what you think. So, yeah, silly me. I originally envisioned to do this all in one video and quickly figured out, after having 3 pages of notes on the first chapter itself, that that's probably not how this is going to go down, which I think is probably better for you guys. We're going to go into this more in depth. I'm going to try to do as many of these in a row as I can, but I'm going to split off and do some other videos on unrelated topics. But you'll get this pretty quickly. I'll try to do 2 or 3 of these in a row. And I'm also going to try at the end of every video to explain how this is important to a practicing magician. That's why I assume a lot of you are here. And if you're here for a history lesson, I'm going to tell you, you might not be in the right place, because I am going to add a little bit of that mythology. And this is going to be a perspective from a magician, not necessarily an historian. In the first chapter of his book, Rittner gives us the definition of magic from the perspective of the ancient Egyptians. And he settles on the word Heka as the word that Egyptians used for magic. He admits that the word itself, its meaning kind of shifts over time, like everything else for 3,000 years of ancient Egypt. But Heka is how the ancient Egyptians viewed magic. And Heka, religion and magic were completely intertwined. Magic was not something that was done outside of religion. There was almost always a religious component to all magic. And I know here in the West, we're heavily influenced by the Catholic Church. And, it dominated our culture for thousands of years. Still has a large influence. And the church and Christianity in general sees magic as something other. And to the ancient Egyptians, there was no distinction. Often it was the intercession of the gods that made your magic more powerful and more useful. We'll get back to that later. So the gods are doing magic all the time. People are doing magic. And another thing to understand is that magic is not something supernatural for the Egyptians. It is the natural order. Magic is how the universe works. Magic is how the universe came into being. The people who are doing magic, Rittner says that oftentimes it's clergy in their off time they're doing magic for people, sometimes for hire. But when it comes to ancient Egypt, you've got to remember that there was seldom a full-time priesthood. And I'm going to use that word priesthood because a lot of the scholars use it, and there's no gender connotations there. There were plenty of women involved in this. And also, in ancient Egypt, priest lended an authority sometimes to another vocation. You had priest scribes, you had priest engineers, you had priest metallurgists. And by the way, there's lots of evidence of women being involved in metallurgy in ancient Egypt. Kind of makes you think about how, those gender roles are a construct. They didn't really have the idea of a side gig. This was considered part of their role. So, yes, these were religious people who were practicing magic, but not necessarily full-time priests going out and doing just magic as a side benefit of their own duties. Which brings us to another important point, that the ancient Egyptians definitely believed that magic came from within the magician. That everyone had the power to do magic. Sometimes magic required the intercession of the gods. Sometimes that magic compelled the gods. That sometimes even earthly magicians could make the gods do their will because, the gods are made of magic. They're the ones who are best at it. And there's lots of gods in ancient Egypt that are said to be great of magic. And it's interesting that these were seen as the most powerful gods. not gods who had great force of arms or physical prowess, is magic was the ultimate power, and he who is great at magic was greatest amongst the gods. Hail Thoth. Another interesting thing to note is that the word Heka itself not only means magic, but it also is the name of the god of magic. And once again, we see concepts and gods being interrelated, like the concept of Ma'at. The Egyptians like to personify things. And I think this is a continuation of that animist thread where even these abstract powers are something that can be reasoned with on a personal level. And magic is closely associated with speech and saying the right words. And it's Heka that imbues the words of the gods with magic. Heka rides on Ra's solar bark as it descends into the underworld. Heka helps defeat Apophis. Heka is part of the natural order of things. They have a role in maintaining that order, and that's how vitally important magic was to the ancient Egyptians. It was the force that kept the universe moving. And to back this idea up, Rittner quotes the coffin texts in what he describes as the longest theological exposition on magic placed in the mouth of the deity himself. And within the spell, Heka addresses the gods in the presence of the creator and declares his origins and powers. O noble ones, who are before the Lord of the universe, behold, I have come before you. Respect me in accordance with what you know. I am he whom the unique Lord made before two things had yet come into being in this land, and by his sending forth his unique eye when he was alone, by the going forth from his mouth when he put logos upon his mouth. I am indeed the son of him who gave birth to the universe, who was born before his mother yet existed. I am the protection of that which the unique Lord has ordained. I am he who caused the Ennead to live. I have seated myself, O bulls of heaven, in this great dignity as Lord of Kaz, heir to Ra-Atum. I have come that I might take my seat and that I might receive my dignity, for to me belonged the universe before the gods had yet come into being. Descend, you have come into the world in the end. I am Heka. Powerful stuff, even for a god. Gods are known for their bravado, for making declarations of their power. But you can see how, this carved into the side of a pyramid really relates how important the ancient Egyptians thought Heka was. And there's some nominal evidence. I often talk about how outside cultures influenced ancient Egypt, but of course that goes both ways. And there are those who believe that the ancient Greek god Hecate, her name is based off the Egyptian word for magic. Not a lot of evidence for it, but it is definitely a curious synchronicity, we'll call it. So, as I promised, I'm going to answer the questions. Well, how is this useful to me as a magician, Threskiornis? Well, I think it's really important that we try, at least, to put ourselves in the worldview of the Egyptians. That magic truly is the foundation of how the universe works. It's not subatomic particles, it's not time, it's not information, it's magic. The universe runs on magic, or you can call it consciousness if you want, but ultimately that is the foundation stones of the universe, the how and why of the way things are. And it's a really hard perspective to actually fully accept in our modern world. I believe in science. I think science does great things. But underlying all that science, underlying all that, nitpicking of the different clockwork ways that the universe works, for me, is magic. And if you accept that as a magician, then you're accepting your power. And just like the ancient Egyptians, then, the magic comes from within. We all have the power to do this. So if you want to see more of this series, you know what you got to do. You got to like and subscribe. Thank you to everyone who hits that subscribe button. While you're waiting for me to drop the next one, which I'll get to as soon as I can, and that one's going to have more details on the nitty-gritty of the Egyptian practices, head on over to our Ko-Fi page. I could really use your help with Ko-Fi donations. All of my Scarlet Ibis sacred oils are now available in the Ko-Fi shop. These, I'm really proud of these. They're all handcrafted, made through maceration. All the equipment and all the materials that go into these oils are blessed and consecrated. We've got your standard Abramelin oil, a prosperity oil, a blend I call the Magi, and my favorite, my Red Goddess oil. You can get those at the Ko-Fi shop. You can also head over to our Redbubble store for Scroll of Thoth merchandise, like t-shirts and phone cases. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.